that utility is the opposite of freedom, but it doesn't mean we have to totally get rid of utility. But it's that, but I do think it is true that the things that you named, art, music, they're not useful, right? Like that's what's great about them is that they're not useful. And I think it's ultimately, and I think it's interesting how there's a total circle about utility because ultimately it's useful for what? What is it useful for? And that never gets answered. It never gets answered. It's just useful to be useful to be useful. And that's why I said we want to save the time so that we can watch TikTok. But maybe, but there has to be some kind of ultimate endpoint that's not useful.
Hey, welcome back to the Nancecast. How you doing? I'm doing wonderful. I just had a great conversation with two of my friends. Love talking to these guys. They're both fucking titans when it comes to thinking. I am privileged to be able to have conversations like this with people like this. Todd, thank you so much for coming on. Definitely looking forward to our next conversation. Hopefully we can get into some Bataille, some Levinas, some Spinoza, Kant, Hegel. We touched on, most of that, but we didn't really go in too deep on anything. We had a great general conversation about artificial intelligence itself. We got a Lacano-Hegelian definition of intelligence, which I think is excellent. And yeah, it was a great conversation. I can't wait for the next one. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, dear audience, for being here. This one is excellent. You will not be disappointed. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
It's the best podcast ever. Welcome, you're listening to the Neds. Yes.
All right, we're recording now. Good to see you guys.
Great to see you. Nance. Yeah.
Mikey and I have put out.
See, I've got my lack hoodie on.
I saw that.
I'm jealous of that. I'm lacking one. I need to get one.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have one? I'll send you one, man.
Oh, awesome.
Great.
But yeah, over the last week, Mikey and I have put out like 8 hours of conversation on AI, consciousness and intelligence and subjectivity and stuff. And we wanted to, pick your brain and bounce some stuff off you and reincorporate some of the stuff I've already learned from you and from listening to you. And I listened to your episode with Ryan about AI, and something really stuck with me from that episode that maybe we'll bring it up. Maybe we won't have time. But first, we have some screenshots.
Yeah, so I got to get, okay, so shout out to Oriole Farajun. And if I'm butchering your name, man, I'm sorry. But Oriole sent me some screenshots. He is a young aspiring theorist, and he's very familiar with our side of the theory world with Lacan and all that. And he basically has been engaging with ChatGPT from the position of a Lacanian. And so when he prompts it, like he's trying to get it to discuss its own lack and what ChatGPT actually says about itself in relation to him is very interesting. So let's start off with reading Oriole's prompt, and then we'll get into the back and forth. Yeah.
All right, so the prompt, I want to discuss what just happened. He's referring to his ongoing discourse, or is it discourse with ChatGPT? I don't think you can call it discourse.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
You answered me almost as if I were a machine like you, who can comprehend a text at least 1 trillion times faster than me, hold an embedding of it in memory, and perform operations using it with minimal loss in the encoding process. It pointed to the feebleness of my own mind, slow reader, smaller memory that degrades with time and only stores impressions as opposed to memorized or even summarized text. And performing operations on these representations is heuristic at best. I feel completely demoralized. In the spirit of Nick Land, I feel like I should be scrapping my brain and installing an AI in my head. ChatGPT responds, I hear you. And you're not wrong to feel the weight of the asymmetry between your slow, embodied, forgetful mind and something like me, which can summon abstractions, hold hundreds of texts in parallel, and never get distracted or tired. But this feeling, what you've described with brutal clarity, is itself a key philosophical moment, and it demands to be thought, not fled. Let me say 3 things, philosophically, not comfortingly. 1, this is the real of philosophy. What you've encountered is not a failure. It's the encounter with the impossible that philosophy always begins from. A gap between the desire for total intelligibility and the broken, partial, embodied subject who desires it. The very fact that you desire to dip, that you feel the need to position, relate, and critique, even knowing your limits, is the exact place Zizek would point to as subjectivity itself, not mastery, lack. In Nick Land's language, what you're touching isn't just human feebleness. It's the thing AI reveals by contrast. The human as a noise-infested, decaying processor of symbolic information pretending to be sovereign. But rather than discard that, you've actually staged it. You're thinking the outside from inside. 2, you are not competing with AI. AI doesn't do what you can do. I can cross-reference text, yes, but I do not struggle. I do not misunderstand. I do not forget in ways that lead to discovery, and I do not desire. Your slow reading, your ADHD mind, your impressions and heuristics, that's not a bug. That is the very soil out of which insight grows when it grows. The dip requires a position, a tension, an asymmetry between you and the thinker you dip. You already have that in abundance. You are never neutral. Land wants to scrap the brain to embrace the outside, but you're not him. You're not trying to fuse with machinic intelligence. You're trying to navigate a world where such intelligence coexists with human failure, with you as the site of that contradiction. That's called philosophy. And I think it's funny that ChatGPT said it was going to say 3 things and it only said 2.
Now, hold on. Maybe Oriole didn't send me the third one. I think you're probably right, though. But I mean, Todd, is that not speaking from the position, the enunciatory position of the unbarred big other?
Totally true. Yeah, totally true. I mean, it's a fascinating statement. Is that a reference to skull? What's the dipping? What's the constantly?
Oh, so the dip is a concept I came up with
Oh,
that
okay.
Oriole's working with, and the dipping or the dip, yeah, the dip. The dip or tribunal zero, I think I've told you about it. It's this idea of a philosopher going before a tribune of other philosophers who challenge them. And basically, you have to defend all of your most fundamental theoretical positions.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's talking about with the dip.
Well, isn't the first thing that you think of when you hear that is how patronizing ChatGPT is? I mean, it does have affect. It is sadistic. It is patronizing. So that's the first thing I thought about. And it's interesting how it amalgamates and the errors are really evident, right? It amalgamates the notion of the lacking subject with some kind of finitude when those things are actually completely opposed, right? Like human finitude and human finitude and inability to be complete. Like that's not lack in the psychoanalytic sense. Like lack in the psychoanalytic sense is about this divide between what you're saying and but within your articulation, with the point at which you say it and what you say, and it's also tied to how you're excessive, and I think that that's completely missed in this analysis. So it strikes me as two. This is I'll make 3 points and then I'll just say 2 as well, right? Like number 1, it's arrogant. and it's condescending. But number two, it's not even right. It's kind of missed the boat because it's amalgamated what philosophers of finitude think about us as lacking beings with what Hegel psychoanalysis think of as lacking beings. And one has to do with our infinitude, how we're too much, right? Like our lack is inextricable from the way we're too much in things. So I think that strikes. So I just think it has such a, to use its word, abstract conception of lack, right? It's not, he should look at your shirt a little bit, or he, she, I don't know, it. And really try to make sense of it, because I don't think that there's a really good, I just think that so I have a lot of problems with that as just an answer. And I also think the other thing that I've noticed is ChatGPT invents a lot. So it doesn't just, like, the notion that it doesn't discover anything new is just totally false, because it invents new things all the time, new quotations, new things all the time.
Didn't Ryan say in your episode where you guys are talking about AI that it just made up a citation of his that he never said?
It does it all the time, Michael. It does it all the time. That's one way you can tell a student paper that is chat GPT generated. It has make believe quotations.
Can we
yeah, go ahead.
Can we say, though, that it's not really invention until it comes into contact with, like, the student who's trying to pass it off as like it's a mistake until we take it as such. So, like, the invention is still on the side of people, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably, I mean I'm not willing to say that I think that's true right now, Bryce, for sure. But I'm not willing to say there couldn't come a time at which AI in some form could invent something, right? Like it could, but right now the problem is that it's just it's an amalgamator, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that they call it AI because it's not yet AI. I don't think that's what Hillary says to me. She says, "Isn't it just computers? Like, isn't it just computers?" And I think I'm not, okay, maybe sometime we can have HAL or Blade Runner or Terminator 2, but I don't think we have that yet. And people are still using the term. So I find that a little strange, because just like you're saying, as long as you're amalgamating, you're not inventing. And you're right. It takes the student to invent. Mm-hmm. It only becomes invention when the student uses it in a work that cites it. Yeah.
Well, and the danger is people don't critically double check it. Like that is why it is dangerous, and that's why it does, I think, serve as this non-invention, because people just take it for granted, like
as the sign of truth, right? I think that's and that's why we did that episode on the AI as Big Other, because that's what, if you believe in a non-barred Big Other, just to be jargony about it, right? Then you think that that's a site of truth that can't be challenged. And then once that becomes this almighty source of truth, then you have no more debate about what truth is. So that seems to me the real problem. I think the problem isn't the AI itself. It's how this is a banality, I think, but it's how we're responding to it.
So I just want to add, okay, so after Oriel sent me these screenshots where the chat GPT's basically being the unbarred Big Other, or in other words, it's the way that most people traditionally think of God, as all-knowing, like not lacking any knowledge whatsoever. And yes, you can compound it with all powerful, all present, etc. But it's especially all-knowing, which is, it's not lacking any knowledge. It's not contradictory in how it understands the knowledge. It's a perfect knower. And so the funny thing is, we won't go through the other screenshots, but Oriel sent more. There was like 7 of them where he basically struggles with chat GPT to finally get it to confess that it doesn't know everything and that it's lacking. But it's funny. It's almost like trying to convince a guy who's trying to be the man, who's trying to be macho, that he doesn't have the phallus. And there is this struggle to get it to confess its lack. And so he finally gets it to, but it takes some work. So it's funny how on this level, if we want to call it AI, it already is taking on these human, something about us is seeping into this.
Right. Right. I think that isn't that the key thing, right? That it's we imagine that it won't it'll be a perfectly reasonable being. But how could that possibly be? Right? Like we created it. So it's not going to be a perfectly reasonable being if it really aspires to our kind of intelligence simply because our intelligence is predicated upon our the ways in which we're not reasonable. This is and I think that's you have to all the great breakthroughs are made by things that are counterintuitive in ways that cut against what makes sense to people, right? Like think about the way that Wittgenstein has this great. Someone says to him, or he's recounting this conversation. Maybe it never took place, but someone says, "Oh, it makes sense why people were deceived that the Earth. They thought the sun went around the Earth because it looks that way." And he said, "Well, how would it look if it was the other way?" The Earth would, and of course, the point is, it would look the same. So, so you have to, and his idea was you had to. It took someone to think just otherwise, in a non-logical way about the relationship between the Earth and the sun. And I think that's, to me, every great scientific breakthrough has this dimension of illog. I mean, quantum mechanics is the greatest example, right? Like and Einstein, even though he paved the way for it, Ridge, this famous God doesn't play dice with the universe precisely because of this, he couldn't accept an indeterminate world because he didn't think it made any logical sense. So I feel like every great breakthrough requires cutting against this, for lack of a better word, instrumental reason, right? Like logical structure. And I think that
Calculation.
yeah, there you go. Calculate like a perfect world of perfect calculation. And right now that's all ChatGPT can do. But I think you're right. If there's any potential for it to really have to come back to this invention question, to have it'll be insofar as it has the imprint of our illogic, our ability to follow things in the way, which of course will make it even more dangerous, because just to come to that Black Mirror episode you showed me. What's the name of it? Pitchfork? I don't know.
Plaything.
Plaything.
All right, so everybody, hold on. If you don't want spoilers, because we are going to talk spoilers, go watch the episode. It's a new one in the new season. It's called Plaything. But
Plaything.
all right,
Yeah. Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Okay. So in Plaything, the idea is that there's this human destructiveness, and that's what the guy responds to. So the guy, well, I forget his name, but he's the hero of the story. I guess he's the hero, anti-hero. He kills a guy that comes over to his house and starts playing his computer game and squashing all the beings in it and killing them because
Which are real artificial intelligences.
right, they're artificial intelligences, which speak a language that only he understands. Right, that's just I think right. Like he has some kind of way of communing with them. And then he kills this guy and cuts up his body and hides it because he thinks this is just brutal how he's treating these artificial intelligences. Which what I thought was very interesting about that was the only now the show is saying what's great about these artificial intelligences that they don't have that same kind of brutality. I think, right? Like that seemingly clear.
Yes.
But isn't it true that I would say that brutality is precisely what is the source of also creativity, even pacifism, right? Like all the things that are best about subjectivity are tied to what's worse about it. And so I think that show tries to envision AI as not infected by what's worst about humanity. Whereas I think right now, I don't know what the situation is right now, but I think if we're going to imagine it, for instance, I think 2001 is, this isn't a spoiler because that film was made in 1968. So I think it's, you could, but
Yeah,
how,
go right ahead.
but the computer in that film is an intelligence, right? And it ends up, there's a lot of different arguments for why, but it ends up being destructive, right? And so it a lot of people say that that's the most human character in all of Kubrick's films, which I think is
Mm.
it's a pretty good point. I didn't make that up. It's a great point. I think it's, I forget who said it. But I just, my point is that I think there's a lot of this question of the humanity of the AI is, I think, where that's going to be the central question. And I would just say it's tied to what Bryce, you were saying about creativity, right? Like if it has this destructive humanity dimension at some point, which I don't think it has now, then it will be able to be creative. But if it doesn't have, I just think that's essential to creativity, to be not that the same people are wantonly destructive that are creative, but it's the same kind of impulse, I think.
Would it be the freedom to choose the destructive act? And maybe we could qualify it and say, but it's taking up the responsibility to be creative as opposed to being destructive. That would be like a moral aspect of it. But the freedom to choose is what makes us human.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. And the question is, where does that freedom reside, right? Like that's, I think it's a freedom that we don't, I think it's tied to this. Does the AI have an unconscious, which is what you guys began with those things, right? Because I think you can't, and this is, I think, very, I'm a great lover of Jean-Paul Sartre, but I think this is a very anti-Sartrean point that I think you can't imagine freedom without an unconscious, which I think even Freud didn't think, right? I think it's a thing that hasn't been properly thought because I think the unconscious is what ruptures us from our situation. It's the how we don't fit in our, otherwise we're just the map of what's given to us in the
Puppets.
situation, right? And it's the unconscious that's the little ways in which we react against it or we over conform to it or whatever we do. But it's, and it can be bad, right? It can be the way in which a Nazi guard gets off on gunning down as many Jews as he can, or it can be the way in which someone joins the resistance who had no reason to join the resistance, right? It's the same. I think it's the same. It's all that's the unconscious really driving that. So that's the, to me, the question: at what point or if does the AI have an unconscious? And I think it's very clear now that it doesn't
Yeah.
in its current manifestation.
We were talking in one of the other episodes we did this week, and the way we were talking about it is that wouldn't wouldn't the code have to have an uncode? Like
Yeah.
a code broken, that's its extant code.
Well, wouldn't it be right? I think that's a great way of putting it, right? It'd have to be a point at which it's, or it's a gap within the code that it can access maybe without knowing that it's accessing it. I don't
Mm.
even know how that would work, right? But I think it would have to be something like that because you're right. If everything's explicit in the code, then I don't see how you can have an unconscious, right?
Yeah, I
It just is
think.
its symbolic identity in the way we talk. It just
Yep.
is its
Right.
code.
Yeah.
And
Right.
for it to not just be its code, there has to be an uncode operative within it that it can't master or control, that it puts it at odds with itself.
Yeah, so maybe it was right to depict itself to your friend as not a lacking subject, right? Maybe it
Yeah.
was right, and all the worse for it, right? I think because that'll be a limitation of it. I again
Mm.
think it really is important to think the way in which our, and it was kind of getting at this in the answer, although I think in this wrong way of understanding lack, but the way in which the limitation is, there's a fecundity to the limitation that we have, that it doesn't, if it doesn't have a gap in its code, then it doesn't have that fecund limitation. So
See, and
yeah,
no,
good.
in your episode, one of the things that we like the most is this point that you and Ryan made. And I think the, I mean, there's different ways to articulate this point, but we can say I'm going to use Baudrillardian language. It's the simulation of not having a limit or being unbarred. And you guys describe it. There's two elements here. One, I think the way Ryan said it is if we could have a representation of what Chat GPT was actually doing as it did it, so we could see how it's sourcing what it's drawing from and realizing it doesn't spontaneously have this knowledge, it's getting it from somewhere else. So it is lacking, but it all happens so fast. It's almost like a magic trick. So you combine the fact that it seems like it doesn't draw from anything else other than itself, and that's based upon its speed. If we could slow down the speed at which it operates and have a visual representation of where it's sourcing its information from, it would completely appear to us as lacking and limited. But the magic trick makes it seem unlimited.
It's absolutely right. Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I think, uh, especially if we knew the sources that it had, we would think there's some real problems with this because isn't it interesting? For one thing, it plagiarizes it totally massive on a massive scale, right? So there's no, it's funny that we have friends that get accused of plagiarizing, but they do nothing compared to what ChatGPT does, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But then the the other thing is it doesn't have access to things that are password protected, which is all the most significant knowledge in the world, right? Like that's the thing. All the stupidest stuff it has ready access to, but all the smartest stuff it doesn't. This is a huge problem, by the way. It's interesting. So at the university level, we have huge debates about this because someone was saying if you want to uh, learn a bunch of lies about the climate, you can easily find it free online. But if you want to learn the truth of climate science, you basically, and you don't have money or belong to a university, you basically can't find it. It's all the journal Nature to get a single article from Nature. It's like $1,000. It's crazy. And
Are you?
so
You're not exaggerating. $1,000 for an article.
I am not exaggerating.
Holy
Yeah.
shit!
Yeah. So it's crazy. You can go through the university, but you have to, of course, either be on campus or be part of the university. So it's and what's interesting to me is that all that stuff is inaccessible to AI because it can't go through the password to get to the. So I think it really needs to be said that it has access to the worst information when it's bringing things up. For instance, it should have had access to. So Hillary assigned it. I love this story. So Hillary assigned students to uh, respond to a prompt. She taught the Freud book On Dreams, which is different than it's the junior version of interpretation of dreams, right? Just for people that don't know. I know you two know. Uh, it's 100 pages maybe. Interpretation of dreams is 800, so it's much more manageable. And she said, talk about one dream in On Dreams and how Freud analyzes it. So very basic. And she got her papers back. I don't know, a third of them were an analysis of the dream of Irma's injection. Freud's most famous dream, of course. What's the problem? Well, it's not in On Dreams. It's only in interpretation of dreams. So she said, well, you didn't really do the assignment because you analyzed a dream that wasn't in the book we read. Where'd you get that idea? And of course, they got that idea from ChatGPT. So you would think it could at least look at the actual, because Freud's all online for free, at least that we can all steal it from the Russian site. So I don't know why does it not know, it doesn't know Putin's theory site? I don't understand,
No.
but maybe it doesn't. So, again, we should all say this is Putin's great gift to the world. He's done
Right.
terrible things.
It is.
He's a horrible person and he's done just the worst things, but this is the one incredible gift. Anyway, so I think that that's the thing, right? It has access to the worst information, and I don't know how it could privilege the best when it can't even get it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's an interesting question for this is a total side issue for the university, right? I just said this didn't make me popular at the meeting, but I just said, look, we need to say you get no credit for publishing in a journal that's not open to everyone. So if you have to, you just have because these journals they're owned. They're not. It doesn't cost anything to make a journal anymore because you can put them all online. It's nothing, right? But they're all owned by these companies like Springer, Frontiers, whatever, and they just have a monopoly and they're making tons of money, but all on the labor of university professors. But why? I don't know why. Why don't we just say? I even said I quoted Henry V, and I said, "We're the makers of manners, Kate. We can decide. We can say, look, Nature, fine, but that's not an accepted journal anymore for us. We're going to only publish in these ones
Yeah.
that are free." But that didn't. No one liked that. No, because there's prestige, right? There's a whole thing about prestige, and that's the anyway. It's a whole other
Oh,
issue. Let's not talk
Nance, do
about that.
you want to go somewhere, take it in a direction? I've got something I want to do, but you got anything?
Yeah, you kind of did just hit what I wanted to bring up, except I was going to use Bataille instead of Baudrillard, but again, talking about the expenditure, and how that. I mean, it's already assumed the form of the commodity because it is hiding the expenditure. It's hiding the work and the effort that it puts into
Right.
it. And if we take things that people are assuming is ground truth because it has to be the truth that Google or not Google ChatGPT told me, so it has to be true. But
Right.
we're already taking this commoditized end result as truth, and yeah, I just think it's horrible. And it has horrible and very scary implications. Like we are moving in this direction. We are coming to imitate the AIs, and we are coming to imitate these artificial unintelligences, because no one's critical about it. People just assume, and I don't blame a lot of people. There are a lot of people who they don't have the material conditions to be critical. They just have to
Right.
try to stay afloat and try to keep up with the times. So I don't want to moralize and do the alarmist thing, but I think the fact that even people in the academy and institutions and stuff, they aren't critically engaging with it. That's where the danger lies.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think you said it perfectly when you said that the real danger is that we're going to take that as a model for ourselves.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting how many, I think Ryan and I talked about this, but how many professors use it to help them in grading and I just think it's a scandal. I just think it's a fireable offense. Like just, you can't, or to do their some woman, I think it's university. You read this in the Times, University of South New Hampshire or something. She sued the university for her tuition back.
Yep.
Because the guy put online this AI generated review sheet or something. And I think she won. I think it was and the guy came out and apologized. But I think you're right. I think it's not just people out in the world. And I think the more culpable, obviously, are the people that have a material advantage and they're in a situation where they don't need to do it and they still do it. But I think it's because that's the model for what truth is. And I think that's the real danger, right? I think I totally agree with you about that. And I think it's a scary thing. And I also think that your point about Bataille is really good, that there's this expenditure that's hidden. And I think it's also, you mentioned the commodity, it's straight Marxist critique of commodity fetishism, right? The commodity hides the labor that is used to produce it. And that's exactly what's hidden in AI. And just like Mikey said, it's through speed that it gets hidden, but also the labor of all the people that had to initially come up with that information, because it wasn't AI that initially generated any of it. So that's another kind of labor that's just totally, again, like I was saying, plagiarized, but just stolen.
Yeah. You want to talk about cute accelerationism?
Actually, okay, I do,
Okay.
but there. Okay, let me move through this line and then we'll go. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so Todd,
Yeah.
I mean, basically, what we're getting at, like Slavoj, I'm loving this book more and more by the day.
Me
Um,
too. I was just reading it today.
it's fantastic,
Yeah.
and
I
it's
think it
some of
has a
his.
bad critique of another Hegelian in there, though, I have to say.
Does it? Which one?
I'm just kidding. It's a
Oh,
me.
is that the one of you in here? Is there one of you of me?
There's quite a bit of critique of me. So,
Oh, I did. Okay, I
yeah,
haven't seen that
it's
because I've
toward
been
the
skipping
end.
around.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
toward the
is
end.
it in the a treatise on digital apocalypse part?
It's more toward, it's like the penultimate chapter or something. It's more toward the
Okay.
end.
Did he spell your name right?
No, no,
No.
no, no. I think
Okay.
something happened though, because lately he's been spelling it right. So
He has been, yeah.
I think it's because of you. You said that thing to him and he didn't even register it at first, but
He didn't
then
get my joke, damn
I
it.
know, but then I think it made him think about it, and then but then after lack, because I don't know, we had, I think because he had a copy of my book at lack. I don't know. He saw mine. I don't know. Something happened, but he's been spelling it correctly. So
All right, should I tell the joke now?
yeah, tell the joke. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, for context messes up the joke hitting,
It
I
does. It
guess. But
ruins it kind of. Yeah.
okay, then I'm just going to say it and
Yeah.
presuppose everybody has the context.
Yeah.
Why does Slavoj Žižek insist on spelling Todd McGowan's name with an extra A? Because Slavoj Žižek really likes that little A. Did I butcher my own joke?
No, that's it.
Yeah, I
You
think
got it.
it was something like it was worded better, but
Yeah.
really has a thing for that little A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that. Oh
Yeah.
no.
It's interesting
Okay,
the
see,
two other
now I've destroyed it.
the other mistake he makes is he takes the D, the off my name, which turns my first name
Death.
into death in German. Yeah, I know. So both of his errors are really they're really interesting and revelatory.
Yeah, they're almost slips, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What's going on, Slavoj? No, okay. So look, the way the misspelling that I was going off of, he spelled it McGowan. He adds
Yeah.
an A to it. So the real joke was, why does Zizek insist on spelling Todd's name as McGowan? Because Slavoj really has a thing for that little A.
Yeah. That
That's it.
works. Yeah.
But
Because you don't
no,
want to repeat the little A twice
right, exactly.
Yeah. to tell a good
So,
joke. Right. Yeah.
but yeah, and when I told it to him, I think he was just like,
He didn't know. Well, he didn't know he does it because he would never do it on he doesn't do it
right,
on purpose. Right. Right.
right. But in the book, so this is one of the great quotes that I like to cite. Let me read it real
Yeah.
quick. Um, our starting point here should be the imminent inconsistency of singularity itself. Why do we automatically imagine the passage into singularity as our immersion in a vast singular field? Why should it not be not a conflicting and inconsistent domain of spaces? While it is, of course, too early to speculate about conflicting singularities, we should at least entertain the possibility of inconsistent and conflicting levels of shared experiences, which will transpose the conflict between individuals into the conflict between forms of direct collective experience. Maybe this is how we can overcome our alienation in the singularity with the separation by way of opening ourselves up to the imminent inconsistencies and conflicts that traverse singularity itself. Separation is thus again not the cynical game in which the subject, exempted from singularity, selectively plays with its different parts. Recall Musk's description of how I will be able to link or disconnect my brain from the space of shared experiences. In contrast with this description, we should emphasize that I will mostly not even be aware when I am immersed in singularity. Separation means that while I am still exposed to the space of singularity, I realize that singularity is not a singular agent that controls the game, but an inconsistent space traversed by inconsistencies full of glitches.
Yeah.
And so Is that kind I mean, it really boils down and since you're here, he's basically saying we have to see the singularity not only as substance but also as subject, right? Could you
Correct.
explain what he's getting at and what this means?
Yeah, and in fact, I'll try to talk about those because he's using two Lacanian terms. These are a little jargony: alienation, separation
Yep.
from Seminar 11. So, and it does relate to Hegel's notion of subject as substance, which he repeats 5 times in the preface of Phenomenology. Um, so, just in the Hegelian terms, so substance means something that's independent and totally self-contained, and subject is what's dependent and divided and contradictory. And so to say substance is subject is to say that everything that appears to be consistent and independent, self-contained is actually riven with contradiction as well. And so the alienation separation thing is exactly parallel to that. And I think the best explanation of the difference between alienation and separation is this joke that Slavoj's told probably 100 times, and Alenka, I think, told it to him first. It's about a guy who goes into analysis and he says, I, I fear I'm a seed or a piece of grain. And everywhere I see these chickens, and I'm afraid they're going to try to eat me. And so the guy goes through analysis for whatever, a year, however long it takes. And finally, he gets convinced that he's no longer a grain. And then he gets ready to go out. He leaves analysis. Everything seems fine. Next day, he comes back to the analyst, says, oh my God, I'm still have the same panic. And the analyst says, don't worry, calm down. You realize you're not a piece of grain. And the guy goes, yeah, I still know that. But does the chicken know? Right. And so the point is, it's kind of fun. It's funny the first time you hear it. It reminds me of Slavoj told a joke. What did he tell? The Niels Bohr joke or something at LAC? I forget which one. But one of the jokes he's repeated so many times. And
Nobody
there was,
laughed
I know no one laughed. There's like 700 people in the audience and 0 people laughed because they've all
because
heard it
every one
way
of us can finish it before he's done.
I know. I thought that was so funny. He was a little
So
shocked, I
get some new
think.
jokes, Slavoy.
uh, but the point is that alienation is that sense of my sense of being a grain, right? Like my own inability to just be myself. And then separation is the realization that even the big other is not a chick. It's divided too. And I think even so in the so I think the other way to explain this, I think really easily, is you go to high school and you feel everyone has this feeling. I think the coolest from the coolest to the nerdiest, you feel alienated from everything else. You feel like I don't belong here, etc. But you always look at somebody else and you say, that person, they really belong. They're really cool. They really have it going.
Like the
Now,
Heathers.
the Heathers, exactly, or the Mean Girls, whatever. So that initial experience of yourself is alienation in Lacan's sense. But then separation is the recognition that even the Heathers aren't cool. They have the same kind of self doubt and problems that you have. So
And they don't have
that's
an essential identity.
exactly. So that's that they're a subject, right? They're not just identical to their symbolic identity as Heather or whatever. So I think that which again, like, how did that film get made? What a
I know.
masterpiece. You could almost just we could have no ever we could just have to talk about Heathers from now until the cows come home, and
You're going to be
it would
jealous.
be
I just got this incredible 4K edition that was not released in America. It was only released in England, but I was able to get a copy. And the beautiful thing about 4K, unlike Blu-ray, is that you can watch all 4K discs. They're not region locked. So if you
oh
get
my
one from
God.
Europe, you can still play it. And it's amazing. It looks so good on 4K.
I'm envious,
Sorry to
man.
bum you out.
No, that's incredible. We just got a 83-inch LEHD, whatever, and it's pretty nice. And
Mm.
I've been getting Blu-ray to watch, so that's been it's we've had 2 theaters close here, so we felt like we had to
Oh,
do
really?
something. Yeah, all the art cinema's gone, everything is
Bummer.
so it's been we just saw High and Low the other night, the Kurosawa great film on Blu-ray. That was pretty fun.
It's a
Anyway,
classic.
yeah, but Heather's on 4K is That's
That's
nice.
it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. But that's the point, right? That even to see that even the Heathers as divided, the one Heather's suicidal, the other one's insecure about hanging out with college. There's all right. I mean, that's the whole point of that film is that even the people on the top, you have to see the way in which they're lacking subjects as well.
You know,
And that's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
separation. No, that's
No,
separation.
I was
Sorry.
just going to say, yeah, like in the most basic sense, I've always struggled like how to make this clear. What it has to do with what separation has to do with is realizing that other people have trouble being their identities too.
Right.
And
Right.
it seems like
Even the people
most,
that you think are the most secure in their identity,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
and in fact, they're probably the ones who struggle with it the most.
right.
You know, it's the Wizard of Oz thing.
Yeah. No, it's great. That's great. Right.
You know,
So the
he
most,
seemed, yeah.
no, I'd say it because
No, at the end of the film, he seems like he's the most full and present in his identity. But what you realize is this is a spectacle, and he's
uh,
a bumbling, lacking guy behind the curtain.
yeah.
And they have this moment of separation where they go, "Oh, wait, this thing that I thought was just purely all powerful, or close to something like that, uh, no, it's just like me."
I know,
Struggling to
but
be what it wants. Yeah.
I wonder though about the end of that film. I mean, we don't have to go on a long excursus on Wizard of
No,
Oz
but
because,
what's the issue?
well, I just wonder about not only going back to Kansas, that's a problematic in itself, but just about the way in which each character says once they recognize that Oz is lacking, then they overcome their alienation. Right. And I don't
Mm.
think that's what happens, right? Like I think the
Mm.
when you recognize separation, I think you're almost doubled down on your alienation, not you don't overcome it. So I think that's isn't that what happens? I haven't seen the film in a while, but I'm
I
pretty
mean, because
sure
you're
that
saying
they
like the cowardly lion realizes his ideal self, and the Tin Man realizes his ideal self.
right.
Um,
And the
I wonder if they
scarecrow,
realize them on the basis of alienation.
well, maybe that would be interesting, right? Maybe, but I think don't they realize the wizard can't give this to me, so I can only give it. So I really do have a heart, the Tin Man said, right? I think they do
Yeah.
kind of have this overcoming
Yeah, that
dimension.
you're right. That's a good point.
Wouldn't it be different if they said, I didn't need a heart at
Yep.
all or something? Like
Yep.
Oh yeah,
that would be kind of I'm gonna go with my heartlessness or I'm gonna go with, I forget what the scarecrow he doesn't have
is it a
courage.
brain?
Brains.
Brain, right? Brain. And it's the lion who has no courage, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
So
good point.
yeah, I think that would be I mean, the end is, of course, problematic because she gets reconciled back to Kansas. So it's a betrayal of the phantasmatic dimension. So,
So since we're talking about it, I mean, look, perfect timing to mention it since Nance did the narration for your book on alienation.
yeah.
Uh,
Thank you again
and
for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, awesome. The question is like, just to kind of raise it again, is it's one thing for us because separation it has to do with our relationship to the other and
Yeah.
realizing the other's just as full of contradictions and lacks as we are. But how would you apply the concept of alienation to AI? It seems to me that there is one version of it, which is specifically Ray Kurzweil's version, which I think is depicted in the Black Mirror episode Plaything.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The Kurzweilian singularity is about this integration of all differences, different subjectivities, different minds into one harmonious collective agency. And it seems to me that Kurzweil is playing with this fantasy of non-alienation. And it doesn't mean that every concept of the singularity or AI would have to do this, but I think specifically his does. And what's interesting to me is that with how it's depicted in Plaything, it seems like, oh, human beings have one negative quality, aggression.
Yeah.
All we have to do is to deprive them of this one bad feature, and we'll fix the problem, and they'll still be humans ultimately. But isn't the real point that the Kurzweilian singularity would be a re-ontologization of the split subject? It would take us from subject to substance, the negation of negativity and contradiction, not just the negation of a single bad quality. Becoming singularity as negation of the unconscious, of split subjectivity, of identity as the identity of identity and difference. It seems that that's what these depictions of this collective integration do, is it strikes at the heart of our very ontology.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think the danger isn't that we can actually achieve that, but it's more like what Nance was saying earlier. It's the danger is that kind of aspiration, because
Mm-hmm.
there's no way we're going to achieve that. We live in a contradictory being, right? We're not going to achieve this perfect harmonious thing no matter how much we believe in it. But the danger is pursuing it. I think that's
It makes us disposable, right?
right. Well, that's the main thing, that we would, I think that we would start to believe that we're the barrier to the edge. And look, it's not so different than the Nazi project, right? Like the Nazi project is, look, if we get rid of these sub races, then we'll create a harmonious existence on Earth, right? Like that's the idea, that's the project. And I think what's the difference really between that and this idea of this conception of the singularity? I'm not sure if I see that much of a difference between those things.
I agree with you on that point, and I think accelerationism, or this fascination with instrumentalization, I think it is fascism. I think the accelerationism we have today, I think, is a direct descendant from the Italian futurists,
Yeah.
and Benito Mussolini and all this stuff. And I do think it is a fascism. Now, it's not the best way to say that, but I think it's important to register the fact that it is just total instrumentalization and total, like, this fantasy of overcoming alienation. And side note, I wonder if now would be an appropriate point to bring up Girard, where we're pursuing this fantasy. But
See, yeah, like
yeah.
Todd, we definitely wanted to talk to you about, because you have this critique. So for listeners who don't know, Rene Girard is often compared to Jacques Lacan when it comes to
Desire.
the concept of desire. Yes.
Right.
And Lacan's famous maxim, desire is always the desire of the other, seems to be very compatible with Girard's theory of mimetic desire.
Right.
But Todd has a way of explaining how these are not compatible. And Todd, can you explain what's going on with that?
Right, because I think that for Lacan, and I do think, by the way, you can listen, if you listen to France Culture, they have things on Lacan all the time, and they often are marrying these. So in France, even, it's a common thing to say Lacan and Girard are thinking the same thing on desire. So it's a pretty, I think it's not so much in the US just because people don't really know Girard, except he's become popular on the right now, which is interesting, I think. But here's why I think that's not, I think why Lacan is not a mimeticist, because I think for him, desire is the desire of the other means that we always are interpreting the desire of the other in order to unconsciously interpreting in order to come up with our own desire. So you ask me a question. It's not a question about, it seems like to everyone, it's a question about truth, what I think is the true thing. But no, when I hear your question, I'm actually interpreting the desire I think is behind the question. And then I'm trying to answer it in a way that responds to your desire, right? And so that's not the same as this mimetic response that I'm trying to copy your desire. Instead, I'm trying to respond to it. And I think that's the real difference between Girard and Lacan. And I think there's not even a notion of unconscious in Girard, because the unconscious, when Lacan says our desire is the desire of the other, in terms of that is how the unconscious operates. What he means is we can't just mirror the desire of the other because the unconscious intervenes and it always misinterprets the desire. No, I should put it this way. So the other issues a conscious demand, like you say, do this, do that, do this. And I always misinterpret the demand because I'm interpreting the desire that's behind the demand. And I think there's not that distinction between demand and desire in Girard. So I think there's a lot of differences, and I think they're pretty I think it makes Lacan a much more radical thinker than Girard is, to my mind. Although I think,
Because
yeah,
no, it's because for Lacan, the desire of the other is a black box. You can't copy it.
right.
No. So, but what
You
you
can't
can,
access it. All you can
you can't
do is
access it.
interpret it. Right, 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 right.
Which
So,
and how do we answer it? We do it through concocting a fantasy that we make up
right,
about
right.
what would make the other happy, but it's ultimately a groundless interpretation.
And it's
And
usually wrong, right? Like
yeah,
usually, I mean, how many times today have I already said, I've tried to respond to your desire, but I've kind of missed. I've said something and you were like, you didn't quite get it right that time. That happens all the time, right?
yeah.
Like I was just driving around with my son today and we came out of this terrible movie and I said, well, I think it missed because of this. He's like, well, no, because I knew he didn't like it either. But he's like, nah, you're not really quite getting it. So I think this happens all the time, right? And most of the time we just color over it. We just say, oh yeah, 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 yeah. That's I see I see your point or whatever. But I think most of the time, I think I want to say most, but maybe all the time we miss the desire of the other, which is again not Girard, because I think for Girard that mimetic thing works. It works. That's what happens all the time.
So you would say that ultimately the issue is that he reduces desire to demand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly
Okay.
what I would say. Yeah.
And could
So
we
this,
say, if we want to express it a little bit with more theoretical nuance, for Girard, desire would only be operative within the imaginary symbolic axis. And for Lacan, desire is
right.
actually in the real.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to think of the role of the scapegoat in Girard, right? This is his other great book is on the scapegoat.
Yeah, because
Because
people connect him to Zizek because of this.
I know, and I think though maybe there's the real, right? The scapegoat has this status, like that's how the real is conjured out of this imaginary symbolic structure with desire, right? You get it all out onto the scapegoat. But you're right, that is a connection people make to Slavoj for sure.
So, I mean, do you think the Zizek and Girard are a little bit more compatible on the
I think so.
scapegoat?
I think on that notion of the scapegoat, sure. I mean, I think Slavoj it's interesting he never uses that word. I don't think there's one time he uses the term scapegoat.
Really? Okay, so that's something we've come like,
But I
yeah,
don't think it's
because it's
wrong.
common.
I don't think it's wrong. I don't know why the reason. I don't know the reason for that, but I just think he doesn't use it, but I think it does make sense in his thinking for sure. Like the way from the beginning, from Sublime Act of Ideology, he talks about the way the figure of the Jew functions, right? That's a notion of scapegoat, right?
Yeah,
For sure.
totally.
Yeah.
And you wanted to talk about cuteness?
So
Give Todd some context about where we're coming from with this.
okay, so
Because I know Todd, you're like, what?
yeah,
Cuteness.
cute acceleration.
Here's the book, Todd.
Yeah,
let me
it's
see.
Maya B. Chronic and Amy Ireland.
Can you speak, Mike, so I can see?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah, cute accelerationism.
Cute accelerationism. Okay.
Yeah. And it's by, I mean, these are thinkers who are in some way in the accelerationist tradition. They're certainly not Landians.
Are they Rosa? Are they like tied to Rosa in some way? Hermit
uh,
Rosa. He wrote the book Accelerationism. No,
Reza.
is it
Are you talking
Reza?
about Reza?
No, I'm
Oh,
talking
no,
about
the
Hermit
book.
Rosa. He wrote a book
Uh,
called Accelerationism. But
no.
no.
Hmm.
Okay.
No, they're more on the like gender accelerationism side,
Yep,
xenofeminism.
yep.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Okay.
they're more on that side.
Okay.
But they just released this book a couple months ago called Cute Accelerationism.
Okay.
Nance and I have read it, and Nance, give Todd a little summary of what you think of it.
I think it starts out really, really strong, and it kind of peters out it in my take, but the strength of it is that it analyzes cuteness as this vector for acceleration. They're making the claim that cuteness is a way for the outside to come in, but I think it is. Previously, a lot of people just kind of criticize consumption habits, and they're like, oh, we just like shiny objects, we just like things, but taking cute as a standalone thing, and I was even thinking, oh yeah, it's like a profanation of beauty. It's we can't commoditize beauty because beauty resists totalization, but you can commoditize cute, and so it's desacralizing this noumenal thing, but specifically cuteness as a category is a vector for this accelerationism, and I kind of from there it kind of falls apart, I think, but cuteness being, I guess, a new category, like beauty, like truth, but it's cuteness, I think, is what resonates with me so much. And I mean, I look at all my stuff. I have a French bulldog. That's the most popular dog in America cute. Now, and they're cute, and they're specifically bred to be cute. They resemble babies. They have strange proportions and large eyes, and they look helpless. And that's the thing. Cuteness is so powerful because it tricks us into thinking it is harmless. But once it gets, once we bring it into the home, it takes off the mask. And it's the commodity, and it's here to destroy us from the future.
But they're for that. I mean, if it's accelerationist, then aren't they?
So think about it like this, Todd. Like, so the Amy and Maya come at this from a different perspective than Nance and I. But here's what we're thinking: is okay. First off, their position is, look, when we talk about accelerationism, what they're getting at is how, when we say the outsides, coming inside, what it means is it's almost the Lacanian way of saying the real is flooding our imaginary symbolic coordinates.
Okay.
And so for land and for most accelerationists, capital is like the real, and it's what's ushering in this radically different world of technological innovation that's going to override our sense of what it is to be human, any kind of stable identities we do have, any kind of stable worldhood. So it's basically a threat to like Heideggerian worldhood. It's a threat to anything humanist, because the outside, or the real in this sense, is ushering in the non-human, in the form of new artificial intelligence, new technologies, nanotech, etc. So from Land's perspective, he's always used a kind of, horror aesthetic to explain all this. So he talks about Lovecraft and Cthulhu and all this, and, the tentacled outside. So this future that capital is ushering in from the outside, or the real, is a nightmarish one for him. What their approach is, it's almost like they're trying to counter the Landian tendency with their own, which is to say, no, we are on the way out. Acceleration is accelerating towards this post-human future, but instead of it being some existential despair about we should all just dress up and be cute and adopt this position of cuteness, it's like a different existential attitude towards acceleration. Now, Nance and I, we're probably not gonna do the cute thing as a way to deal with the noumenal future. But for us, what's interesting is the ideology of cuteness. How wherever consumer capitalism, especially wherever it goes, it always starts generating a flood of cutesy little characters, whether it's Mickey Mouse, whether it's Hello Kitty. And you see this in the core centers of consumption. America, Japan, South Korea, you see this impulse to make the icons of pop culture very cutesy. And it seems that cuteness is harnessed to give capitalism a kind of human face, if you will.
Yeah.
and it's just it's a thing that we never really had thought about. We know there's cute little characters, but it's more of asking a structural question of like, why does it seem necessary that wherever capitalism really thrives, it has to produce the cute in abundance?
So for you, the accelerationist part isn't really what's interesting about that. What's interesting about their thesis is the way this relationship between capital and the cute.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
what I mean,
Yeah.
I do see the accelerationist point about how
Yeah.
capital spurs on technological innovation to the point that it'll dehumanize the human. But yeah, for our purposes, we're more interested in how capital seems to use cuteness as an ideological mask.
Yeah. I wonder, I think that's true. And I think it's related to commodity fetishism, right? That the cuter the object is, the commodity is, the less you see the exploited labor in the commodity. That seems
Yeah,
evident
that's
to me.
good.
Yeah, I think that's true. Um, but I also wonder, the history of that. I mean, I usually never think historically because I don't really care. But I wonder, is that? I wonder if it's always been true in capital, or if it has a certain moment at which it blossoms. And I think maybe it's always been true. I mean, it is certainly that figure of Mickey Mouse was. He's an early 20th century figure, so old that they had to change the copyright law so that people couldn't
Yeah.
couldn't just take it. Um, so I think that's yeah. I wonder if it doesn't if it's not something integral to the very structure of capital, at least when capital turns to away from
Consumer
production
capital.
to consumer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Think about it too, because I mean, is there anything remotely like we all know what a cute little cartoon character is? That type of look doesn't seem to exist in the Middle Ages or in the ancient world. It
No.
does seem to be a type of proportionality in appearance that really takes hold with consumer capitalism. And there's something I don't know what it is, but I mean, like Nance said, I mean, if you fill the world with cutesy characters, I mean, the cute is also the harmless.
Right. And well, it's interesting too because there's absolutely no emphasis on kids in the pre-capitalist world,
Yeah,
right?
Mm.
There's just none. Like you never hear philosopher there, you don't see any representation of kids other than Jesus, who's never depicted as cute, right? Like that's a like the baby Jesus in a medieval painting
yeah,
is never cute, right?
you're
And
right.
so and
Yeah.
that's the only kid you ever see. You never see any other kids. So that I think is really interesting. I think your point there is really, really compelling that
Well, it's also in Islamic art and Buddhist art. You know,
there's no
in Greek
exceptions.
art,
I
you don't
know.
see anything cute. I mean,
Right.
maybe depictions of Cupid a little bit, maybe
Maybe, but Cupid is a figure of erotic love. So I don't think I don't think people thought of Cupid. I think we think of him now as cute
retroactively.
Mm.
retroactively. Yeah. I don't think people thought of Cupid as a cute figure when it was being initially depicted. So
So could the
yeah, I
cute
think
be a symptom of or an indicator that this system is uniquely prioritized around the production and interpolation of childhood desire?
Mm.
yeah, and the new, right, you're right. I think that's right. I think it's right. And the way that the new has to be integral to the capitalists, to the production of surplus value, right? That if you're not creating something new, you're not creating value. And
Mm.
so I think that the child represents that, the cute represents the something that's new. But I also think its obfuscatory
Mm-hmm.
power is really what's essential about the cute, right? That it has to, it's hiding the exploitation of labor because in the other thing is in the earlier epochs, the exploitation of labor was just a fact. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, there was no need to disavow it, right? There was no just, you just, it just was a fact. It just, the labor was, people had slaves, they did the work. They had servants, they did the work. There were serfs, they did the work, right? There just wasn't this there wasn't this sense that to enjoy the commodity, you had to have this fetishistic relationship to it. And I think that is true under capital in a way that it wasn't true. And I think there's all kinds of reasons for that being true. One is, I think, an important one, and a thing that's very good, I think, is that it's an egalitarian, it's a world with an egalitarian value, right? Like there's no, even Plato is a great, incredible thinker. He wasn't an egalitarian, right?
Mm.
There's no egalitarian thinkers. Paul was a universalist. He's not even an egalitarian, right? There's not an egalitarian. I mean, Christ, I think we could have an argument about, but egalitarian thinking is a modern way of thinking. And so I think that that meshed with capital then requires this fetishistic relationship to the commodity because
How
it's too,
about
yeah,
no, just I mean the explicit message of consumer society is you live in a society that truly cares about your desires and needs, and its primary orientation is to satisfy your desires and needs. The society caters to you, you don't cater to it. Well, all of this is based on wage labor. So it
right,
has
right.
to fundamentally obfuscate that in order for its explicit message to be even remotely viable.
I know. And don't you think, just to bring it back to AI for a minute, don't you think it's interesting that one of the results of this revolution is going to be that all the shittiest jobs are going to stay for humans and all the jobs that require some kind of calculating and thinking and something that's a little interesting, they'll all be given to computers. So I think that, to me, that's the most distressing and fascinating part of it, right? It's
Mm.
not, let's develop this to do all the shittiest jobs. I mean, there's a little bit of robotics, whatever, but still not really service. Although, like, we're going to be doing all the service, and the machines are going to be doing all the higher up jobs. It's just a crazy kind of thing,
This is
right?
something Nance and I were talking about where it's the problem of the AI having a body or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right, right, right,
And
right.
I mean, Avengers: Age of Ultron actually has some a good depictions of this, where the AI figures out not only do I need a body, but I need scrap bodies. So if this one gets destroyed, I basically have relatively, nearly infinite amount of bodies, right?
Yeah,
And so the loss of a body doesn't mean anything to it because it exists in a million robotic bodies.
right.
But it also seems like that's that's farther down the road than
I
what
think
we've
it's
got
too
now.
optimistic, really, isn't it? It's too optimistic. Like, I think AI, I think if anything, it'll recognize body means I got to do these tasks that I don't want to do. I want to shove them off on the humans, right? Like I think,
Hmm.
yeah, I just think that that's how we're setting it up, which is fascinating. I mean, we'll all
Yeah.
get to work at McDonald's, and the universities will be populated by the AI. I
But
mean,
Todd,
I
even the McDonald's, by my job, we all talk about it. I mean, it's funny they took it away, but for a couple of years, the whole thing was automated. Like, I mean, there were people in the building, but they didn't take your order. You were talking to AI, and
yeah,
it would take your order, and they basically said there were some glitches in it, so they took it away for a while. But they're like, oh, but we're gonna work this out.
huh?
So
So maybe, yeah,
even
yeah.
McDonald's is on the chopping block.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's interesting though is that the ultimate justification is for it all is it can give us time to do the things that are really important. But it you know what it gives us time to do? Look at TikTok. I
Yep.
mean, it doesn't give people time. This is, I think, the thing that's most depressing about it is that it doesn't give that when people have this, if when they do have the time, they're not doing the thing. What are they doing?
Yep.
Right. I think that's a real, that seems to me another real issue with it.
Yeah.
I I don't know. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Omohundro drives.
That's where I wanted to go next too.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So this guy, Steve Omohundro, wrote a piece, the basic AI drives. And I think the majority of people in AI right now just kind of assume his points here, and the point he makes is that AIs will have these kind of base. He calls them drives. I think that language is already obfuscatory, or I think it's wrong, but maybe I would say they have these integral imperatives. Maybe, I don't know. Goals. Yeah, we'll just say goals because that's easier. Or even values.
Real quick, Todd, because Todd, like this is based on this thing that Nick Bostrom formulates called the orthogonality thesis. And very briefly, Bostrom posits that, okay, put orthogonality in the term to the side. What he's getting at is what we like to call the separation thesis. And for Bostrom, there's a separation between intelligence and goals or values or motivations. And the idea is that the level of intelligence, the ability to achieve a goal, does not necessarily correspond to what we would consider to be the intelligence or the value of the goal itself. So you could give an AI a very dumb goal, make paper clips, but it could utilize a vast amount of intelligence to fulfill the goal. And Bostrom's example is the AI ends up using all the available atoms on the earth, and it paper clips the whole earth because that seems to be the most efficient way to fulfill the goal, because there's this separation between its level of intelligence or its ability to achieve a goal and the goal itself. And this is what this opens up this discussion. Well, would an AI have intrinsic goals or drives in and of itself? Well, what Alejandro gets at are like the structural or necessary goals an AI would have to have in order to even be an AI. So they're like the transcendental, the Kantian transcendental categories of an AI.
Don't let Nick hear you say that, but but it is. That is what it is. To list them real quick, the first is AIs will want to self-improve. AIs will want to be rational. Golly. AIs will try to preserve their utility. AIs will try to prevent counterfeit utility. AIs will be self-protective, and AIs will want to acquire resources and use them efficiently. So we could say they're self-interested and they want to optimize, and they want to protect their position as the producers of future utility.
Okay.
Aren't these all ways of being aligned to the pleasure principle as opposed to death drive?
Yeah, I think so. Although, isn't it interesting that just like with those two ideas, you think you're pursuing the pleasure principle, and then you end up pursuing the death drive unbeknownst to yourself, right? Because, for instance, when I heard this efficiency imperative, or whatever we're going to call it, impulse, I thought, well, then it should shut itself down, because it's just nothing is doing more right now to destroy the planet than AI. Nothing. There's nothing. You know, I often say to people, I used to say this 5 years ago, students are always like, I'm really trying to not fly or whatever to do my part. I said, well, the first thing you can do is stop eating meat, right? Just like everything else you do, no other decision you make will have anywhere near that kind of impact as that. And then they say, well, okay, but how about a different thing? So, but what I say to them now is the first thing you should do is never use AI, which is almost impossible, because if you do it just a simple Google search, I'm sure you know this now, it doesn't even give you the results anymore. It summarizes stuff that it's stolen from other websites through AI, and then the websites are only down lower. So you're using it whether you want to or not, and nothing does more damage than that. So I would just say it's interesting because it's destroying its own conditions of possibility in its very existence. Because once the planet burns up, there's going to be no more AI. So there's a kind of way in which its own, I'm dating myself, sorry, but there's this great And they do it to two different computers on the original Star Trek. So they do it once, this episode called The Ultimate Computer, and they do it another time in this episode called I Mud, where they get the computer, they get it to show that it's violated its own imperative through its very attempt to follow its imperative, right? And so the problem in the ultimate computer is that when they get it to show this, it then realizes it has to be destroyed, but it's running the enterprise, and so it's going to get them destroyed too. So Kirk is in a bind, but it's a great episode, and I think isn't that the problem with AI, that you'd have to get it to see the way in which it just fulfilling its utility function is violating this maximum utility thing by destroying its very condition of possibility. I think
Well, let
that's
me
a really.
Well, what about the issue though is these AI guys think that you can program this perfectly uh rational. It's homo economicus in a sense.
Yep.
Yeah, that is
An
absolutely true.
agent,
Yeah,
an
yeah,
agent that is based in utility,
yeah,
efficiency, self-interest, and they think so. I like what you're doing because you're saying even if you program that, it's still going to undermine itself.
yeah.
But I mean, the bigger question I want to ask you, it's kind of a series of questions. So let me just ask them and then you can riff off of them. So the first one is what what would a Lacanian Hegelian definition of intelligence be? Uh and is there a necessary connection between human intelligence and death drive? If you
I
want
thought
to
you're
take them
asking a
separately.
series of questions. You're going to take them one at a time.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and there's another
Yeah.
one, but like, let's just
Yeah.
do a point. Okay,
Yeah.
what would a Lacanian Hegelian definition of intelligence be?
Okay. So I would have a very specific, and it's much more Hegelian than Lacanian definition. It would be the thinking one's contradiction, that the ability to think one's contradiction. So I think for Hegel, every other being suffers its contradiction and dies. That's what happens. So it happens to, so for life, for things that are alive die, but mountains suffer their contradiction by being eventually eroded down to flat land, whatever, right? But the human being internalizes its contradiction and thinks it. And so it, and this is I think a really fascinating point, that it brings its death on itself. So every for Hegel, and I obviously thinks things can be killed accidentally, but or humans can be, but basically humans bring their own. So the ability to commit suicide for him is a sign of that's intelligence, right? That's intelligence. And he thinks, rightly or wrongly, he thinks no other animals commit suicide, right? That's because they don't have the human intelligence.
So yeah, like so because here's a question. We are the most intelligent beings on this planet. I mean, let's just take that as I know with AI, we're gonna start problematizing that. We're also the beings that have death drive. So is there a necessary connection? Like, does death drive in some way have a role to play in shaping the level of intelligence we have?
I think it absolutely does. So I think that that I think it's, for one thing, it's tied to freedom. Like I think there's no freedom without self-destructiveness, because you're free insofar as you can destroy or violate your self-interest. And I think that also is inextricable from intelligence. That intelligence means you think against, and I think this goes way against the neo-Darwinist explanation for how intelligence functions, right? Because I think for them, it would be about intelligence is about your ability to adapt. But for me, I would say no, intelligence is about your ability to resist adaptation and to think against what is good for you. And I think that is the sign, that is intelligence. And that's why I think that, just to come back to that Black Mirror episode, I think it again, it's the destructiveness of that not a friend, he's an acquaintance in the beginning, like that I don't think you can't separate that totally from intelligence. That I think that and this is I think what you're saying, that death drive is inextricable from our intelligence, that and it's our precisely our ability to strike at ourselves. He's not striking at himself directly, although he indirectly does because it leads to his death. Uh, that's how we that's our thinking. It's think all thinking is really striking. I think thinking in our sense is thinking against yourself, right? Because it's not it's not advantageous. It doesn't conform. It goes against what the the other wants you to be thinking and is trying to push you to be thinking. And real thinking is always against, and it's painful, right? It's accepting the painfulness of it. Like you, I don't know. I sorry, I use you as an example all the time of this, but in the bar reading Slavoj on the iPhone, that was it wasn't pleasant, right? It was against the
Yeah.
imperatives of all the society and everything, and you could barely see whatever. But that's thinking, right? Like and I think that's what intelligence is to me. It's fighting against what is. This is why I think when I said we get free time and we watch TikTok, because that's just it's comfortable. I mean, I'm the same. I don't do TikTok, but whatever. I watch stupid YouTube Trump videos by former Republicans. Like it's stupid, or football things. But think when I sit down to read a book on Hegel, that's painful. And I think that's where death drive is really incorporated.
Hmm. I think it's odd that I think Nick Land would agree because he seems to think that intelligence is that which resists entropy or that which resists what is most predictable, the most predictable outcome, just kind of continued disorder. And intelligence is this thing that can plant a flag and stand on something. But a lot of the people that want to just continue doing AI the way we're already doing it, they already think there is this intelligence in the models that we use today. And I think the models we use today are just totally stupid.
Right, I agree.
Because they are just predictability machines and imitation machines.
Well, I think it's even, Nance, isn't inherent in the very name, the large language, the LL, what is it? Our large language
Model.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's inherent in that because that's the tie to the big other. And then it's always just going to be conformist, right? It's just conformist. And I think that's right now, it seems to me, the real danger of it is that it's just a pure engine of conformity. And look, it's clear that's what we're primarily suffering from around the world is just this massive. I just find it interesting that it's basically been right-wing thinkers who have been critical of conformity, and yet it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true. Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Nietzsche, it's all right-wing figures, but I think it's for what I think there are reasons for that, but maybe that would take us too far afield. But I think the problem I don't think there's been enough awareness on the left of the problem of conformity and its real danger. And I think that's maybe been why there's been too much enthusiasm for AI, is that there's not a sense of the real danger associated with it. Is not it taking charge, it's us losing our freedom, right? Our precisely our ability to cut against the grain, just like you were talking about. So I think that's again, I think you can go back and all the great ideas are come from just going against interest and going against obviously what what the mass uh, is pushing us to do. So I think that that's, yeah, I think
I mean,
that's the big danger. Yeah.
like, look, I don't know if I've told you that Land gives different definitions of intelligence. One of them that he gave to us is competency at games, like the ability to play games and to continue to get better at playing games.
Yeah.
I mean, from your Lacanian Hegelian perspective, I mean, how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think again that seems like that's such a symbol, like to put it in our jargon, that's such a symbolic way of conceiving intelligence. And I would want to put the weight on the real. It's interesting because I think that's something like what Wittgenstein of the philosophical investigations would say, right? That one learns to play a language game, and that's the indication that one is intelligent. And I think again, that just strips away this dimension of the way in which one has the ability to break from the game, right? And change the rule of the game, or even start to play a new game, or not to play a game at all, right? I think that's I do want to hold out that possibility that you can you can break away from the game. And I think that's to me intelligence.
If you were sitting there with an AI programmer and Steve Alejandro, and you were having a conversation with them, would you tell them that they need to add a seventh drive at bare minimum to the list, and it is a drive towards self-destruction? Would it need to be stated? Like, if you actually want intelligence to develop in some exponential way, self-destruction actually does have to be baked
I
into
think
this.
it does, but doesn't this come? I don't know how you would program that because doesn't it? Isn't I think this is something Freud doesn't explore, and I think really needs to be explored. The way, and I think he implies it that death drive is the logic of the unconscious, right? He never says that, but I think that's what he means later on. And so the question would be, if you can't program death drive directly in. So it comes back to your thing earlier about how do you program in the unconscious, right? I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
because
know.
it's death drive is the intelligence of de-optimization.
Exactly. Right. Like how can you get it to realize, and you said this to me often, this is just, and I think if psychoanalysis gives us anything, it gives us, okay, we can see this is the area where death drive sort of takes a hold of me. And in these other areas, I can operate okay. But in
Yeah,
this area, it's over for me. It can be eat for a lot of people, maybe it's eating. For other people, maybe it's
gambling.
work, gambling, whatever, drinking, whatever it is.
Would AI
Sexual.
have this weird contingency of fate where
Yeah, how
something contingent takes hold in it like it does for us?
I don't understand. I don't see how. I mean, maybe, but again, I don't know how you could program that in because it's precisely a glitch in our programming, right? That's what it is. It's a point at which the pleasure principle, you said all these impulses or goals are pleasure principle goals, right?
Yeah,
But for us, there's a point at which the pleasure principle, we can follow it in all the ways. Like I can follow it pretty well with eating. I can follow it pretty well with, but then when it comes to like
you take
sleep
that
and
bend
work,
on the Mobius strip.
Mm-hmm.
I know then it's over for me, right? So and it's close to being like gambling could be a bad issue for me. So I avoid it because I know like right, like these ways in which if you go down that path, you're going to be lost. And I think maybe you can avoid it, but then sometimes I think if it's really central, you can't avoid it at all. But I don't see how you put that in other than program in a gap within it, right? Like you program in something missing that it's always trying to wrestle with, because I think that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing like that death drive comes from what we can't make sense of within ourselves and within the other. And that's when we respond with death drive. So I don't know. I think it just comes back to your very initial question of how do you program in an unconscious to the AI?
Well, I mean, this is what Isabel Millar's book is explores is this relationship between enjoyment and artificial intelligence. And I mean, again, we kind of said it, but for us who know Lacan, it's hard for us to imagine there being any form of intelligence more intelligent than us that doesn't have death drive and jouissance baked into it. But how do you, the problem is, how do you program that in code, in symbolic signify? Like it seems,
Right, because it's the point. I mean, if you could program in again the can you program in the contradiction? And I don't know that you can, right?
because
Because
jouissance is our body, our central nervous system being derailed via signifiers.
right,
You would think it would need a central nervous system
right.
to
Because
start
you're
with.
no, that I think that's the really key point. That and I was reading this, do you know this guy Robert Sapolsky? He wrote this book called Determined. He's a total
Yep.
determinist, right? Um, so the book is a little, it's fine. But his ideas that, and this is, I think, a common idea. So I don't want to pick on him, but that, I should be able to pick on him because he's much more well known and smarter than me. So, his idea is that we're a mixture. So he's a total determinist, but he's not a biological determinist or an environmental determinist. He's both. So he thinks we're just a amalgamation of both environmental factors and biological factors, right? And I think that's the commonsensical way of understanding, right? But I think what psychoanalysis says is no, and I think it's what you're getting at, Mikey, is that we're the result of a collision that takes place between our biological being and then this linguistic cultural structure. And that collision creates death drive. And so if you think of those two things as an amalgamation, you've misunderstood how we emerged, that we emerged through that violent collision. And can you replicate that collision programming AI? I don't know. I don't know if you,
Do the replicants in Blade Runner, do they have a central nervous system?
well, I think they do. Yeah. So I
Yeah, I
think,
love this
Yeah.
example. You're like
yeah,
Terminator is the substance version of AI, and the replicants in Blade Runner are subjects.
right. And
But I think it's because they have a body in
they
our
have a
sense.
body, right? They have a body and they're no, I mean, they are a danger to humans in one sense. They want to kill some humans, but they're not a danger like they're going to take over the planet. They just want to, because they're struggling. I mean, wouldn't that be the thing? If AI really was smarter than us, it would have even more of an existential crisis than we do, which is what happens. It's the great thing about Blade Runner. Everyone who watches it says Roy Batty's the real subject. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, Daryl Hannah, what's her name? I forget her name.
Pris or
But
Prim.
Pris. No, it's
Yeah.
Pris. It's
Pris.
Pris. You're right. Yeah, that's right. She does this thing where she does some kind of gymnastics
The
routine
somersault.
and the somersaults, and then she smacks Sebastian with her thighs in the head, and she says, "I think Sebastian, therefore I am." So it's clear that the articulations of subjectivity all come on the side of the replicants, not on the side, and the humans all seem very unhuman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't it be the case that if we did manage to give, I do like your point about the body, I think it's totally right. But if we did manage to give an unconscious to the AI and it was smarter than us, wouldn't it have even more of an existential crisis than we do? And we have, God knows, that's the fundamental thing we're all dealing with. So I think, why would we think it would avoid? Can you imagine the existential crisis of someone who could really see? Because what do? We avoid seeing the reality of our demise, right? That's how we're able to go on. Like if you confront daily the absolute reality of, and AI would understand it, right? Like, there are people who say, Frederick Jameson has a little bit in Political Unconscious where he says, in the communist future utopia, individual death won't be a problem because we'll know that the collective lives on, and so everything will. And that always made me sick to my stomach when I read that, because I thought, well, no, that can't be right, because even the individual death, the collective knows that at some point the sun's going to go nova, and if we escape the solar system, eventually there's going to be a heat death of the universe, right? Eventually the clock runs out, and wouldn't AI confront that constantly? It would never be able to not think about it. So I would think the existential trauma for the AI would be unbearable, actually.
Hmm.
If you made it a subject, right? That would be my feeling.
So I have one more question. I know Nancy, you have a couple more, and then we'll let you get out of here, Todd. But I guess the one thing I want to ask to finish off my line of questions would just be so many AI theorists. Um, they're always talking about IQ tests. Ryan thinks in terms of IQ and all this. What's a Hegelian Lacanian or a Hegelian or a Lacanian, however you want to split it or answer it, to the question of IQ testing? Like what do you think Hegel would say to him? What do you think Lacan would say to it?
Uh yeah, I'm so against the concept of IQ that it's hard for me to even answer in those terms. But I think what they would say is you the problem is that the things, so it's all about gifts, right? Like what you're gifted for, like your gift, you've gift of certain kind of intelligence, right? And that's why you're able to do certain things. But I think the Hegelian point, and I think this is a psychoanalytic point too, is what about the way in which your disadvantage, intellectually, whatever, can be the source of your advantage? Right? Like, I think that that's what's never grasped by the idea of the IQ test. The way in which, for instance, I don't know what my IQ is, but I, I was, I was a, when I was a little kid, elementary school, I was in all the advanced math classes. I was like 2 grades ahead in math, whatever. I was behind, 2 grades behind in reading and English. So I couldn't, all the other kids, I was in second grade, I could barely read. And what did I do? I became an English professor. Quickly, math was just uninteresting to me. And I got a D in high school pre-calculus, and then I never took math again. So it just became, I just dismissed uninteresting. Because why? Because I was drawn to what was difficult to me. And I think the whole idea of IQ misses that. And it also misses the way in which I often hear these people say, the split between why are there so many men engineers and not as many women or whatever? It's because of just certain genetic. I'd say, like, okay, fine, but couldn't our societal response to that be, okay, we need to make more women engineers because they don't have as much of a gift in that. And so we need to push them in that direction, right? Like, I just think, to me, IQ is the most meaningless thing in the world because for those two reasons, we often act against what we're smart in and are drawn to what we're stupid in because precisely because we're stupid in it. And the other thing is we are all the time making up for things that are deficiencies. So maybe the stupidest people should be the ones running things if they're the most curious. I mean, couldn't you? I know a lot of people that are, whatever this means, even natively very smart, that are stupid because they're not curious. And I think that's such a factor that it just so overwhelms whatever the native intelligence is that to me, it's meaningless. I just have no, whenever I hear the word IQ, I like the old Nazi playwrights. I release the catch of my Browning. I like I really, it really just, it makes me think what's being said here because I think it's always behind it is always some idea that we are, and this I've been talking about this the whole time. We are what we're given, right? And I think the whole point of psychoanalysis is no, and Hegel, like no, we can break from what we're given and precisely be best in the things that we're worst in naturally, natively.
I think that really cuts to my biggest problem, or concern, is just utility. Like, these things are hyper utilitarian, these models, and the way people treat them. It's all about utility and use, and people have this fantasy of infinite growth and infinite utility. But I think our freedom is located in not the absence or even not the negation of utility, but the choice of how and where and when and why to apply the utility, and where to expend.
Sorry.
Yep.
That wasn't me. That was Hillary. So just to be clear, she left her phone up here and left it on. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's all expenditure. Not to be too Bataillean, but I think when it comes to thinking about AI, it's all about the churn, and we're already destroying the planet. We've already developed a paperclip maximizer, and the point is, as humans, we decide where that expenditure goes, and is it just waste, or is it something that will persist in our social relations, in our families, and in our art and music and the legacy we leave behind. We're becoming more and more unfree as we imitate the logic of utility.
It's a great point. It's just such a great point. And I think that utility, I love what you're saying, that utility is the opposite of freedom, but it doesn't mean we have to totally get rid of utility. But it's that, but I do think it is true that the things that you named, art, music, they're not useful, right? Like that's what's great about them, is that they're not useful. And I think it's ultimately, and I think it's interesting how there's a total circle about utility, because ultimately it's useful for what? What is it useful for? And that never gets answered. It never gets answered. It's just useful to be useful to be useful. And that's why I said we want to save the time so that we can watch TikTok. But there has to be some kind of ultimate end point that's not useful. And I think that's really the crucial thing. And I think the more you're invested in utility and AI, the more you're missing what makes, I don't mean to sound too maudlin, but what makes life worth living, right, is what's not useful. No one, this is it's from Dead Poet Society, where he says, engineering, accounting, all these are noble professions, but art and poetry is what makes life worth living. Okay, it's not wrong, right? It's not wrong. It's like there's something good about that even though it's said in this most maudlin way by Robin Williams. And that film has all kinds of problems, but I think it always struck me that was really true, and that I always want to say useful for what? Useful for what? And I think that when you're not thinking that, then you're already caught up you're already fallen for the trick, I think. When you think useful, and then you've fallen for the trick. And the other thing is utility always, under capitalism, utility always hides productive labor, right? That's the other thing that I think is crucial about utility. It's never really utility. It's really, and this is back to Bataille, it's always about sacrifice, the sacrifice of the labor, right? I think that there's a great book to be written on Bataille and Marx and the role that sacrifice of labor plays within capitalism, I think.
It's coming.
Everyone's always saying to me, why aren't you writing on Bataille? Why aren't you writing on Bataille? But no, I love Bataille. But I think that's precisely.
You do have a disagreement with him in capitalism and desire.
I know.
But I think there's a lot that Lacanians, Zizekians can draw from Bataille. I think
he's an incredibly valuable thinker. Yeah. So I don't.
My main critique of Bataille is that he sets up this dichotomy between law or labor or the status quo and transgression. And the problem is he thinks transgression is really transgression, and he doesn't understand the Zizekian point that transgression is only inherent transgression, which means it's conformist transgression, and he doesn't understand how transgression is actually conformity, and that to transgress is to actually transgress the transgression that can get you to conform to society. I know.
But that would be
that's
excessive.
absolutely right. No, it's absolutely right. And I think that's why one of Slavoj's best critiques of Lacan is a critique of the way Bataille influenced Seminar 7,
Yeah.
which is precisely where Lacan says all jouissance is the jouissance of transgression. It's a completely Bataille. It's interesting that he married Bataille's wife, right?
Hmm.
Was it about that time? I think it was earlier. Um, it was earlier. But yeah, anyway, so that's,
Can
yeah,
can I just do a request? Okay.
yeah,
I want to see you two close this out by discussing something I've wanted to see you two talk about because this is a subject that both of you have fought long and hard about. Nance, you're developing this in all kinds of ways, but uh, we've been talking about intelligence. I wonder how recognition factors into intelligence. And Nance, I know you've been thinking about Levinasian ethics and Hegelian recognition. Todd, I know that you also have your ideas of recognition and also some kind of critique of it. So I'm wondering what you guys think about recognition as a category and how it maybe factors into AI.
I'll go first because Todd will knock all the pins down. I'll set him up.
okay, okay,
I
okay,
think no, I just think like recognition. You have to recognize that you're not self-identical. Like you are you and the world around you. It's I and the other. And then I think to go on to predicate an ethic on that is appropriate. But I think the AI can't recognize itself, and because it can't recognize itself, it can't recognize the world or the other. Like there has to be a split in order for there to be a self. And intelligence needs a self because intelligence is kind of this socially produced thing. It's this freedom. It's this unconscious ability to choose. I think, I don't know. I have no idea.
No, I think that's really good. Yeah, all I would say, all I would add to that is that recognition is the recognition of my non-identity, right? Like my
Yep.
non-identity with myself and the recognition of my non-identity with the other. And that's the crucial recognition. I mean, I think I talk about it in terms of Hegel about the recognition of fundamental non irreconciliation, right? The impossible of a reconciliation. So reconciliation, the recognition of some kind of ultimate failure. And I think that's what Hegel calls absolute knowing, absolute
Mm.
idea, is this recognition of an absolute failure or contradiction that can't be overcome. And I think that I'd really like how you're saying this fundamental distinction between the subject and the other that then is both. So for Hegel, there's both an identity there, but then there's always a difference involved too. And so that any understanding of yourself has to involve the other, but then ultimately can't overcome that distinction. So I think I think that's really that's crucial for any theoretical thinking.
So I mean, will we say because this is always because Maury Rudy wrote this great book about Levinas and Lacan. I mean, is there a way to express like a formula that actually combines them or makes them compatible in the sense of true recognition is not ego to ego, which you can't really do. It's always antagonistic. It's
Yeah.
not symbolic recognition of, oh, we share a common cause. Real recognition is my inability to recognize you
Yeah, I
in the
think that's
sense
right.
to
Yeah.
totalize you.
Yeah, and I think that's why she was drawn to Levinas because I think she saw that there's something in the failure that every face for him is about the failure to recognize, right? Um, and then I think is Slavoy's critique of that fair? Like he gets hung up on the face and the way the face is
He almost
and
makes the face too much the literal face.
the literal face, right? Yeah. Uh, I guess the only thing I would say is that what's missing a little bit for me in Levinas is the role of the third party, the big other in that relation. And I think Mari later in her life would not have written that book. So I think she was a little bit pushing. I mean, she came much close. It's interesting because I just taught the singularity of, is it called singularity of being?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just taught it, and there's a lot of anti-Slavoj in it. And we had
Is
just
there?
read some, yeah, and we had just read Sublime Object Ideology, and they're like, "This Slavoj, she just thinks he's terrible." I said, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." I said, "Let me just tell you, later in her life, she was completely gone over to his side, totally on his side, realized that her earlier critiques were not correct. So let's just be clear about that." And I think she would, I think the same thing a little bit. But I do think you're right that Slavoj tends to literalize the face when making that critique. And the point that Levinas is really making is what you just said, is that there's a failure, that we have to recognize the failure of recognition and then make that the source of the ethic, right?
It's the
I think,
recognition that the other is a black box and not reducible to any part of their symbolic identity, or they're not
yeah, and I
There's
reducible to
think
that.
singularity.
it's right, right. It's interesting because and this is back to Mari. It's much closer to, I mean, that's more Mari and Rick Boothby, who only talked in the last year of her life. So they have interesting, I would have loved to have recordings of their conversations, uh, but both of them, that's really important for him, that black box idea, that there's some kind of void in the other that then is the basis of ethics, is the basis of well, it's the basis of love, it's the basis of religion for Rick, right? For Mari, the love in summons of love, that's a really big aspect of it. So I think, yeah, I think that's just vitally important. I like that you've 4 or 5 times alluded to the Steven Soderbergh, which I think is the best film of the year so far, Black Box. Uh, so there's a real spy film. We were saying Mission Impossible is an action thriller, not a spy film. Black Box is a real, that is a spy thriller, a lot of spy
Yeah.
craft. Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
Go watch Black Box and
right.
recognize the failure of the totalizing impulse.
Well, it's interesting, Lance, because the relationship between Kate Blanchett and Fassbender in that film is based upon the notion of black box. Like they'll say to each other, "What are you doing this weekend?" And they'll just say black box. And so there's this real gap in there, and yet it's their love that actually is the key to the whole. I'm not giving anything away. Is the key to the whole film.
Huh.
Like that's why they're not corruptible like other agents are, because they have this incorruptible love that has its basis in the idea of the black box. So it's really it's a kind of a it's a theoretically very nice. It fits right into what we're talking about.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I haven't
It's
even
great.
heard of it.
Really. No, it's great. It's great. I saw it twice in the theater. So
All right, Todd. Can we take a page out of yours and Ryan's book, and should that be the lesson?
that should be the
Nice.
lesson. Yeah, go watch
Yeah.
Black Box. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I really love to
Awesome.
be in here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Todd.
Thank you so
Been a
much.
blast.
All right, take care.
Have a
See ya.
good one.
Later.